Dr. Scheid noticed that this was the most agreeable city, the one to return to after the war, and skipping down of the meeting, Manning writes, "A transcript of that meeting is in my possession. It is a captured German document from the files of the U.S. Treasury Department and states who was present and what was said as the economy of the Third Reich was projected onto a post-war profit-seeking track." By the way, this document emerged as part of Operation Safe Haven, an Allied intelligence operation aimed at interdicting the Third Reich's flight capital. That operation was itself interdicted when the residue of the Third Reich allied with the United States, Britain, and France in the post-war period, that alignment, of course, against the former Soviet Union. Continuing, of the meeting, Manning writes, "Present were Dr. Kaspar, representing Krupp, Dr. Tolle, representing Rochling, Dr. Sinceren, representing Messerschmitt, Drs. Kopp, Weir, and Beerwanger, representing Rheinmetall, Captain Haberkorn and Dr. Ruhe, representing Büsing, Drs. Ellenmeyer and Kardos, representing Volkswagen Werk, Engineers Drosse, Janchu, and Kopchem, representing various factories in Poland, Drosse, Janchu and Company, Brown Boveri Herkuleswerke, Buchswerke, and Stadtwerke, Dr. Meyer, an official of the German Naval Ministry in Paris, and Dr. Stroessner of the Ministry of Armament, Paris. By the way, I may be mispronouncing some of these names. I don't speak German. Continuing. Dr. Scheid, papers from his briefcase arranged neatly on the table before him, stated that all industrial materiel in France was to be evacuated to Germany immediately. "The Battle of France is lost to Germany," he admitted, quoting Reichsleiter Bormann as his authority, and again quoting, "And now the defense of the Siegfried Line and Germany itself is the main problem. From now on, German industry must take steps in preparation for a post-war commercial campaign, with each industrial firm making new contacts and alliances through foreign firms. This must be done individually and without attracting any suspicion. However, the party and the Third Reich will stand behind every firm with permissive and financial support," unquote. He assured those present that the frightening law of 1933 known as treason against the nation, which mandated the death penalty for violation of foreign exchange regulations or concealing of foreign currency, was now null and void on direct order of Reichsleiter Bormann. Dr. Scheid also affirmed, quote, "The ground must now be laid on the financial level for borrowing considerable sums from foreign countries after the war," unquote. As an example of the kind of support that had been most useful to Germany in the past, Dr. Scheid cited the fact that, quote, "Patents for stainless steel belong to the Chemical Foundation, Incorporated, New York, and the Krupp Company of Germany jointly, and that of the United States Steel Corporation, Carnegie, Illinois, American Steel and Wire, National Tube, etc., were thereby under an obligation to work with the Krupp concern," unquote. He also cited the Zeiss Company, the Leica Company, and the Hamburg America Line as typical firms that had been especially effective in protecting German interests abroad. By the way, I would note that these complicated corporate and cartel connections and their profound influence on the growth of the Third Reich are discussed in, among other programs, Uncle Sam and the Swastika. I would also note that the Bush family was deeply involved, that's the family of George Bush, with the Hamburg America Line. Continuing. Of Dr. Scheid's address, he gave New York addresses to the 12 men. Glancing at his watch, Dr. Scheid asked for comments from each of the 12 around the table. Then he adjourned the morning session for lunch. And at the afternoon session, Dr. Scheid also discussed the plans for the industrial concerns of Germany abroad to basically serve as a base for the continuation of the Nazi Party underground, both abroad and in Germany, and also mentioned that, analyzed correctly, that many of the leaders of the Third Reich would be viewed as war criminals after the war, and that they were to be placed with various German firms abroad. Of this, Manning writes, "A smaller conference in the afternoon was presided over by Dr. Bosse of the German Armaments Ministry. It was attended only by representatives of Hecko, Krupp, and Rochling. Dr. Bosse restated Bormann's belief that the war was all but lost, but that it would be continued by Germany until certain goals to ensure the economic resurgence of Germany after the war had been achieved. He added that German industrialists must be prepared to finance the continuation of the Nazi Party, which would be forced to go underground just as had the Maquis in France." And skipping ahead, "From this day, German industrial firms of all rank were to begin placing their funds, and, wherever possible, key manpower abroad, especially in neutral countries. Dr. Bosse advised that, quote, 2 main banks can be used for the export of funds for firms who have made no prior arrangements. the Basler Handelsbank, and the Schweizerische Kreditanstalt of Zurich, unquote. He also stated, again quoting, "There are a number of agencies in Switzerland which, for a 5% commission, will buy property in Switzerland for German firms using Swiss cloaks." Dr. Bosse closed the meeting, observing that, quote, After the defeat of Germany, the Nazi Party recognizes that certain of its best-known leaders will be condemned as war criminals. However, in cooperation with the industrialists, it is arranging to place its less conspicuous but most important members with various German factories as technical experts or members of its research and designing offices, unquote. And one of the central aspects in the German flight capital operation, and it was very successfully realized, were the profound corporate connections between the large German corporations and their counterparts in other countries, including and especially the United States. Central among those German corporations, with its net of cartel agreements with foreign corporations, was the powerful and landmark IG Farben company, the German dyestuffs industry, one of the most important industrial concerns in the history of free enterprise. Continuing with Manning's account of IG Farben's role in the flight capital program, Manning writes, IG Farben had been the largest single earner of foreign exchange for Germany during the years of the Third Reich. Its operations in Germany included control of 380 companies with factories, power installations, and mines, as well as vast chemical establishments. It operated in 93 countries, and the sun never set on IG Farben, which had a participation both acknowledged and concealed in over 500 firms outside Germany. They grew as the Third Reich did, and as German armies occupied each country in Europe, they were followed by Farben technicians who built further factories and expanded the IG investment to 7 billion Reichsmarks. The Farben cartel agreements involving trade and the related use of its chemical patents also numbered over 2,000, including such major industrial concerns as Standard Oil of New Jersey, now Exxon, the Aluminum Company of America, by the way, that's Alcoa, E.I. DuPont de Nemours, that of course is DuPont, Ethyl Export Corporation, Imperial Chemical Industries of Great Britain, the Dow Chemical Company, Roman Haas, Etablissement Kuhlmann in France, and the Mitsui interests of Japan. IG Farben was a formidable ally for Reichsleiter Bormann as in his plans for the post-war economic rebirth of Germany. In a telephone conversation with Dr. von Schnitzler, Bormann asked what the loss of factories in France and the other occupied countries, beginning again. In a telephone conversation with Dr. von Schnitzler, Bormann asked what would the loss of factories in France and the other occupied countries mean to German industry in general and to IG in particular. Dr. von Schnitzler said he believed the technical dependence of these countries on IG would be so great that despite German defeat, IG, in one way or another, could regain its position of control of the European chemical business. Quote, "They will need the constant technical help of IG's scientific laboratories as they do not own appropriate installations within themselves," he further told Bormann, adding that he and other industrialists such as Hermann Rochling, quote, "do not think much of Hitler's recent declaration of a scorched earth policy for Germany. Destruction of our factories will surely inhibit Germany's recovery in the post-war world," he affirmed. Bormann pondered this exchange with von Schnitzler. It was then that he determined to countermand Hitler's order for the ruthless destruction of German industry. He was aware also that the Gauleiters, the regional political supervisors and area commanders of the party who reported to him as party chief, shared the same view as expressed by Dr. von Schnitzler. By the way, I would note in passing that one of the aspects that made the German flight, the Bormann flight capital program so successful was the fact that as the Nazis conquered various countries in Europe, their economies were basically grafted on to the German economy so that the German corporations retained control of the major corporations of the countries Germany had conquered even after the war. And again, the cartel agreements of the various large German corporations, IG Farben among them, in particular their cartel agreements with American corporations, were front and center to the operations of the flight capital program. One of the reasons that I think the condemnation of Switzerland is quite hypocritical. One of the things that Martin Bormann did in order to assure the success of the flight capital program was to set up 750 new corporations in neutral countries to handle the flight of the assets of the Third Reich.